Can you believe a black teenager with no legal background could turn the tables on a seasoned lawyer and a harsh judge? Stay until the end to witness this incredible journey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this. Now let's dive into story. Jordan Carter's hands trembled as he held the eviction notice, his mind racing in disbelief. The words blurred before his eyes, and his heart pounded in his chest. His mother, Angela, had just been served with a threat to be evicted from the only home they had. Jordan couldn't comprehend it. The landlord, Franklin Moore, was demanding they leave. His mother, a hard-working waitress, had always struggled to make ends meet, but they had managed to stay afloat despite everything. They were behind on bills, sure, but they weren't out of options. At least, that's what they thought. Jordan's world felt like it was crumbling. How could they be forced out now? Angela had always done everything she could to keep them from falling deeper into debt, working late into the night at the local diner to support them both. This eviction, though, felt different. It didn't seem right. Jordan's mind raced as he thought about what he could do. The notice had arrived so suddenly, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. They'd been behind before, but the eviction had never come so abruptly. This wasn't just about bills. It was about fighting for their home. Jordan couldn't let this stand. That night, Jordan sat hunched over his desk, the soft glow of his desk lamp illuminating a sea of legal papers. He had already read the eviction notice several times, but something about it still nagged at him. It wasn't just the terms, or the fact that his mother, Angela, was being pushed out after all the hard work they'd put into their lives. There was something more. He'd never studied law, but Jordan had always been a voracious reader, devouring anything he could get his hands on. As his fingers flipped through old documents he'd found online, something caught his eye. The notice had a notary seal stamped at the bottom, and the name of the notary was Martha Allen. Jordan frowned. He had heard the name before, but couldn't quite place it. He pulled out his laptop and started searching, the clicking of the keyboard filling the silence of the night. His pulse quickened as the search results revealed the shocking truth. Martha Allen had retired 2 years before the date on the eviction notice. Jordan's heart raced. He read and reread the information, his mind unable to accept what he was seeing. This was it, the flaw that could tear the eviction apart. He had found their way out. Jordan could hardly contain his excitement as he rushed into the kitchen, clutching the eviction notice. His mother, Angela, sat at the table, quietly sipping her coffee as she read the local newspaper. The house was quiet, too quiet for a Sunday afternoon. Jordan's heart raced, but he had to tell her. This discovery was their chance. "Mom, you need to see this," Jordan said, practically breathless as he handed her the document. Angela looked at him, a hint of concern crossing her face. She had enough on her plate without worrying about legal battles. "What is it, Jordan?" she asked, sounding tired. Jordan pointed to the notary's name. "Martha Allen. She retired 2 years ago. This signature, it's fake." Angela stared at the paper, then back at Jordan, unsure of what to make of it. "You're sure? I mean, this is big, right?" Angela's voice trembled slightly. She wanted to believe him, but it was hard to grasp. "I'm sure," Jordan said, his voice firm. "This is our way out, Mom. I can prove it in court. I need to fight for us. I won't let them take this house." Angela looked at him, the fear in her eyes replaced with a flicker of hope. "Okay, we'll do it," she whispered. The days leading up to the court hearing were a blur of late nights and endless research. Jordan had set up a little makeshift office in the living room, stacking textbooks, legal websites, and binders full of notes around him. Angela couldn't believe how quickly her son had become so absorbed in the case. He wasn't just doing this for their home. He was doing this for justice. "I'm going to need more evidence," Jordan said, flipping through a stack of case files late one evening. "There's got to be something more I can use to prove this was deliberate." Angela watched him, her heart swelling with pride. She'd always known Jordan was smart, but this determination was something else. She wanted to encourage him, but she couldn't ignore the doubt creeping in. Was he ready for a real courtroom battle? "Are you sure you can do this, Jordan?" Angela asked, her voice soft. Jordan paused for a moment and met his mother's gaze. "I have to. I'm not just doing this for us, Mom. If this works, maybe it'll help other families who are being taken advantage of. The weight of what Jordan was about to do hung heavy in the air, but his resolve only grew stronger with each passing day. The day of the hearing arrived with an overwhelming sense of anticipation. Jordan, dressed in his best suit, stood nervously outside the courtroom. His palms were sweating, and his heart raced, but he couldn't afford to show any fear. Today wasn't just about saving their home. It was about standing up to an injustice that could have affected so many others. Angela stood beside him, trying to offer a reassuring smile, but Jordan could see the anxiety in her eyes. "You've got this, Jordan," she whispered, though her voice was trembling. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was stiff and formal. The judge, a stern man with a reputation for being no-nonsense, sat at the bench, ready to hear the case. On the opposite side of the room stood Franklin Moore, the landlord's attorney, a slick, confident man who had no intention of letting a teenager outsmart him. Jordan could feel Moore's dismissive gaze on him as he took his seat. The sound of the gavel echoed through the room, and the judge called the proceedings to order. The trial had begun. Jordan knew that his first task was to prove the invalidity of the eviction notice. He took a deep breath and stood up, ready to face the challenge. As soon as Jordan began presenting his case, Franklin Moore wasted no time launching into an attack. He stood up confidently, adjusting his suit jacket as he turned to address the judge. "Your Honor, I must question the credibility of this young man's claim," Moore said, his voice dripping with condescension. "What does a teenager know about legal documents and eviction proceedings? This whole case seems to be built on a mere misunderstanding." Jordan could feel the weight of Moore's words, but he didn't falter. He had anticipated this moment. This was the first hurdle, and it was up to him to prove that he wasn't just some kid playing at law. His voice was steady as he spoke, presenting the notarized eviction notice with a firm, confident hand. "Mr. Moore," Jordan began, locking eyes with the attorney, "the issue here isn't a misunderstanding. The notarization on this document is fraudulent. The notary, Martha Allen, retired 2 years before this notice was issued." The courtroom fell silent as Jordan's words sank in. Moore's smug expression faltered for just a moment, and that was enough for Jordan to know that the fight was far from over, but this was a good start. The courtroom remained tense as Jordan held up the fraudulent eviction notice for everyone to see. He could hear a few murmurs from the gallery, as if the people there were starting to realize the gravity of the situation. Jordan stood tall, his heart pounding, but his voice remained steady. "The signature on this eviction notice is from a notary who had retired 2 years ago. This document isn't just flawed, it's fake." Judge Reynolds, who had been silent up until that point, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, scrutinizing the document closely. The buzz in the courtroom grew louder as the truth began to sink in. Even Franklin Moore seemed rattled for the first time. He quickly shuffled through his notes, trying to find a way to salvage his case, but Jordan had already exposed the critical flaw. "Your Honor," Moore finally stammered, trying to regain control, "this could be a simple clerical mistake. It doesn't invalidate the entire eviction." Jordan wasn't intimidated. A mistake is not an excuse when people's lives are at stake. This was an intentional attempt to mislead the court. The judge didn't immediately respond, but Jordan could see his skepticism towards Moore's arguments growing. Jordan's confidence soared as he continued to present his case. He had done his homework, and now it was time to prove it. With a calm demeanor, he referenced the landmark case State v. Harper, 2008, which had overturned an eviction on similar grounds, citing a fraudulent notarization. He knew the case inside out, every detail, every precedent. "The Harper case is clear," Jordan stated, his voice strong and measured. "If a notarization is fraudulent, the eviction becomes void. The same applies here." Franklin Moore tried to challenge him, flipping through his own legal books and citing another case. But Jordan wasn't intimidated. He quickly countered with Franklin v. Rhodes, 2011, a case in which a procedural error had led to a landlord losing an eviction case, further strengthening his position. "Your Honor, this is not just a mistake. This is a deliberate act of fraud," Jordan said, referencing both cases. "And as established in these precedents, fraud cannot be allowed to stand." The judge listened intently, clearly impressed by the teenager's thorough understanding of legal principles. More, however, began to falter, losing ground with each of Jordan's calm, logical points. The courtroom grew still, as even the spectators realized that Jordan might actually win this battle. The courtroom was tense. After hearing Jordan's compelling arguments, Judge Reynolds leaned forward, studying the teenager intently. The previous skepticism in the judge's eyes had been replaced by curiosity. It was clear that Jordan's arguments had made an impact. "Young man," Judge Reynolds began, his voice firm yet respectful, "you've done your research. You've cited cases and pointed out discrepancies with remarkable precision. But tell me, how do you know this is deliberate fraud, not just a simple clerical error?" Jordan felt a surge of pressure. His heart pounded in his chest, but he remained calm. He had thought about this moment for days, knew that the stakes were high, but now it was time to take the final step. "Your Honor," Jordan replied, his voice steady. The notary in question, Martha Allen, retired 2 years before the eviction notice was even signed. "This isn't a mistake. It's a deliberate attempt to falsify the legal process. And that's not just a simple error, it's fraud." The judge didn't respond immediately. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the document in front of him. The room was silent, everyone waiting for his next words. Jordan could feel the weight of the moment. It was a test, one that could change everything. The silence in the courtroom felt like an eternity. All eyes were fixed on Judge Reynolds, who hadn't spoken since Jordan's last statement. The weight of his scrutiny made Jordan's stomach churn, but he stayed focused. This was the turning point. Finally, the judge broke the silence, his voice calm but serious. "You've made an interesting case, Jordan. I can see your passion and your research. But this isn't a simple matter of facts. It's about how the law interprets those facts." He paused, his gaze shifting to Franklin Moore, who was visibly tense. The lawyer tried to mask his frustration, but his cold, calculating demeanor was slipping. Jordan had managed to shift the momentum. For the first time, Moore seemed uncertain. Judge Reynolds continued, asking Jordan pointed, legal questions. At first, the teenager was nervous. Each question felt like a challenge. But as he answered, he realized the judge wasn't trying to trap him. Instead, he was testing his knowledge, ensuring he wasn't relying on mere luck. Jordan responded with confidence, citing legal precedents and explaining the significance of his findings. Whispers began to ripple through the gallery. The crowd was beginning to realize what was happening. Even Moore could no longer maintain his usual smug composure. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a battle for justice. The air was thick with anticipation as Judge Reynolds returned to the bench after a brief recess. Jordan stood at the defense table, his hands clammy with nerves, his heart pounding. His mother, Angela, sat behind him, her eyes fixed on the judge with a mixture of hope and anxiety. The tension in the room was palpable, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the final ruling. Judge Reynolds cleared his throat and looked over at the parties involved. He glanced at the evidence Jordan had presented, the fraudulent notarization, the case law, and the thorough arguments that had been made. Then, with a firm but calm voice, he addressed the courtroom. "After reviewing the evidence and hearing both sides, I find that the eviction notice is indeed invalid due to the fraudulent notarization. The Carter family cannot be evicted on these grounds." Jordan could hardly believe what he was hearing. His heart skipped a beat, and a wave of relief washed over him. His mother's eyes filled with tears as she stood up to embrace her son. The courtroom, once tense and full of skepticism, now erupted in a quiet hum of disbelief and admiration. For Jordan, this victory was more than just a legal win. It was a testament to his determination, to the power of standing up for what's right, no matter how daunting the challenge.